My name is Phoebe, and I found a list of women my boyfriend wants to marry. I wish I could say I misunderstood it, that I took something out of context, or jumped to conclusions, or opened the wrong file at the wrong time. That would have been easier. That would have been something I could explain away. But I didn't misunderstand anything. And that's exactly why I can't forget what I saw. It happened on a completely normal evening, which somehow makes it worse. There was nothing dramatic leading up to it. No fight, no weird behavior, no sudden distance. If anything, that day felt calm, predictable, and safe. He was in the shower, getting ready for our dinner plans, and I was sitting on his bed with his laptop in front of me, not snooping and not searching for anything. I had asked to use it because my phone was dying, and he handed it to me without hesitation, like he had nothing to hide. And I believed that, because for almost 2 years, he had given me no reason not to. If you met him, you would understand. He was the kind of man people describe as solid. Not overly emotional, not dramatic, not unpredictable. He had his life together in a way that made you feel like everything around him would eventually fall into place too. He remembered things that mattered. He showed up when he said he would. He didn't play games, at least not the obvious ones. And when he talked about the future, he didn't sound uncertain. He sounded decided, like he already knew where he was going. And I thought I was part of that plan. We had talked about moving in together, not in a vague, hypothetical way, but in a real, practical sense. Locations, budgets, timing. The kind of conversations people have when they're not just dating but building something. So, when I say there were no red flags, I mean it. There was nothing that could have prepared me for what I was about to see. I wasn't even looking for anything interesting. I just noticed a file already open on the screen. At first, I almost ignored it. The title didn't stand out in any dramatic way. Future planning. It was simple, neutral, and almost boring. It sounded like something responsible. The kind of thing you'd expect from someone like him. Organized, thoughtful, and in control. I remember hesitating for a second. Not because I felt like I was crossing a line, but because I didn't think there was anything worth seeing. And that was my mistake. Because the moment I looked closer, I realized this wasn't a plan. It was a list. And it wasn't about the future we had talked about. It was about a future I wasn't even sure I belonged in. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was just a list of names, neatly organized in a way that felt intentional, almost careful. Not random, not messy, not something thrown together without thought. Everything about it looked structured, like it had been built over time. And for a second, my brain did what it always does when something feels off. It tried to make it normal. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe it was a list for some project, something analytical, something that required comparing people for a reason I just didn't know yet. I remember actually feeling relieved at that thought, like I had already solved the discomfort before it had time to grow into something worse. But then I looked closer. Next to each name, there were notes. Notes were short, precise, and almost attached. Not the way you describe people you care about, but the way you assess something you're trying to measure. Good communication. Strong family values. Too impulsive. Emotionally unstable under stress. I felt this strange pause inside me, like my thoughts were slowing down, struggling to keep up with what my eyes were seeing. Because the tone of those notes didn't match anything normal. There was no warmth in them. No personality, just observations, reduced to conclusions. And the more I read, the harder it became to ignore what this actually looked like. This wasn't a casual list. It was an evaluation. I scrolled down, telling myself I just needed one more second, one more line, something that would explain all of this and make me feel ridiculous for even questioning it. But instead, I found more structure. There were categories, clear, labeled, and consistent. Appearance, personality, family compatibility, long-term stability. I could feel my chest tightening slightly, not in a dramatic way, but in that quiet, creeping way where your body understands something before your mind is ready to accept it. Because now it was obvious. This wasn't about work. This wasn't about a project. This was personal. And the worst part was it didn't look new. Some of the notes had timestamps. Small, almost unnoticeable. Dates from months ago. Some even older. Which meant this wasn't something he had made recently on impulse. He had been working on this. He was updating it and refining it. Over time. I kept scrolling, even though a part of me already wanted to stop. Because once you see something like that, you already know there's no version of it that ends well. And then I started recognizing the names. At first, it was just one. A girl he used to mention casually, back when we first started dating. I remembered asking about her once, and he had brushed it off so easily that I never thought about it again. Then another. Someone from his work. Someone I had actually met. Someone who had smiled at me, had a normal conversation with me, had no idea that somewhere in a private file, she was being analyzed like this. And then another and another. Each name pulling me deeper into something I didn't want to understand, but couldn't ignore anymore. These weren't random people. These were women in his life. Women he noticed. Women he remembered. Women he had compared. I don't even remember deciding to keep going. It just felt like I had to. Because somewhere in that list, there was a question forming in my mind, growing louder with every name I recognized. And I was terrified of the answer. Because I hadn't seen my name yet. And I didn't know if that was better or worse. I don't know what I expected to feel when I saw my name. Maybe shock or maybe anger. Maybe that sharp, immediate reaction you see in movies, where everything becomes clear in a single second. But it didn't happen like that. It was slower and quieter. And somehow worse. Because when I finally saw it, my brain didn't react right away. It just paused. Like it needed a moment to process what it was looking at before letting me feel anything about it. Phoebe. Just my name. Sitting there in the same format as everyone else. It was the same font and same structure, no difference. For a second I almost felt relieved. Because that meant I wasn't being hidden. I was part of it. Which at the time felt better than the alternative. And then I read what he wrote next to it. Comfortable. Low conflict. Reliable. I remember blinking once, slowly, as if that would somehow change the words. Like maybe I had read them wrong, or misunderstood the tone, or missed something important between the lines. But there was nothing else. No warmth and no affection. No sign that this was how he saw someone he loved. Just traits. So neutral, practical and replaceable. I felt this strange heaviness settle in my chest. Not explosive, not overwhelming, just steady and undeniable. The kind of feeling that doesn't ask for attention but refuses to go away. And then my eyes moved slightly to the right. That's when everything shifted again. There was a number. A percentage. 62%. I stared at it longer than I want to admit. Because I didn't immediately understand what it meant, even though a part of me already did. I just didn't want to say it out loud in my head, because saying it would make it real. But then I looked at the other names. Some had higher numbers. Some had lower. And suddenly, it wasn't just a list anymore. It was a ranking, a calculation. A quiet, systematic way of deciding who was worth a future and who wasn't. My name wasn't at the top, not even close. And before I could stop myself, I read the final line under my name. The one I wish I had never seen. Good for now. Not ideal long-term. I think that was the moment something in me actually broke. Broke not loudly, and not dramatically. Just cleanly. Like a thought I could never unthink. Because in that one sentence, everything I believed about our relationship collapsed into something smaller, colder, and much more real. I wasn't his future. I was his current option. And the worst part? He had already decided that I wasn't enough. I should have closed the file. That would have been the healthy thing to do. The rational thing. Just shut the laptop, pretend I never saw it, and deal with it later when I had the strength to process everything properly. But I didn't. Because once you see something like that, you don't just walk away from it. You need to understand it. Or at least you think you do. So I kept scrolling. And this time, I wasn't just reading. I was looking for patterns. For anything that could explain how far this went, how serious it was, how much of it existed outside that screen. That's when I noticed something I had completely missed before. Some of the names had marks next to them. Small symbols. Check marks. Stars. A few had something that looked like a highlight. At first, it didn't mean anything. But then I clicked on one of the names. And another section opened. There were more notes. They were more detailed this time. Not just traits, but observations tied to specific moments. Met at Daniel's party. Good social awareness. Conversation flowed naturally. Strong emotional control. Family-oriented, based on discussion about parents. I felt my stomach tighten again, sharper this time. Because these weren't guesses. These were memories. Real interactions and real conversations. Moments he had lived through and then documented, analyzed and stored. I clicked on another name. It was the same there. A breakdown of interactions, impressions, conclusions. Like he had taken something as unpredictable as human connection and reduced it into something measurable, something he could revisit and compare whenever he wanted. And suddenly, all those small, forgettable moments from the past started rearranging themselves in my mind. The times he mentioned someone casually. The times he seemed just a little too observant. The way he would sometimes go quiet in social settings, like he was watching more than participating. I had always thought that was just his personality. Now it felt like something else entirely. Something intentional. Something calculated. I kept going, even though every part of me was telling me I already knew enough. And then I saw something that made everything even worse. Some names had dates and recent dates. Not months ago, and not before we got serious recent. Which meant this wasn't something from the past. It wasn't an old habit he forgot about. It was ongoing, active, and current. While he was with me, while we were talking about moving in together, while I was building a future in my head that, apparently, he was still evaluating alternatives to. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at the screen, trying to reconcile the person I thought I knew with the person who had created something like this. Because those two versions didn't match. They couldn't match. And yet, they were the same person. The same man who texted me good morning. The same man who held my hand in public. The same man who told me, just a week ago, that he felt lucky to have me. And now I was looking at proof that he didn't feel that way at all. It was someone from his work, confident, put together, the kind of woman people naturally notice. I had met her once, briefly. She had been polite and normal, completely unaware of any of this. Next was another familiar name. Someone he had mentioned more than once, always casually, always in a way that didn't raise suspicion at the time. Then the third. And that's when my chest tightened again, but this time for a completely different reason. Because I knew her. Not just knew of her. Knew her. She was someone I had talked to. Someone I had laughed with. Someone I would have described as a friend. I actually felt my hand freeze on the trackpad. Because that changed everything. This wasn't just distant observation. This wasn't just him noticing people in passing. He had included someone from my life. Someone close enough to me that it crossed a line I didn't even know needed to be defined. And the notes next to her name were different. They were longer and more detailed. High emotional intelligence. Very adaptable. Strong long-term compatibility. No hesitation and no neutral tone. Just certainty. I didn't want to think about what that meant. About how many times he had looked at her that way. About what kind of conversations they had that I didn't know about. About whether I had been standing right there, smiling, completely unaware that I was being compared in real time. I felt sick, not in a dramatic way. Just this quiet, steady nausea that comes when something is fundamentally wrong, and you can't undo the moment you realized it. And then I noticed one more thing. Next to two of the names, there were recent timestamps. Very recent. As in days ago. Which meant this wasn't just a list he was maintaining. It was something he was actively updating. Right now while I was sitting on his bed. While his things were around me. While his voice was echoing faintly from the shower in the next room. And suddenly, the situation didn't feel distant anymore. It felt immediate, real, and close. Because at any moment he was going to walk out that door, look at me the same way he always did, and I was going to have to decide whether I could pretend I hadn't seen any of this, or whether I was finally going to ask him the question that had been building in my chest since the moment I opened that file. What am I to you really? I didn't have time to think. I heard the shower turn off. Just a small sound, barely noticeable, but in that moment it felt loud enough to snap everything into place. Like a countdown had started, and I had already run out of time. I closed the file, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I needed a second to breathe. My hands felt cold, even though the room wasn't. My thoughts were moving too fast and too slow at the same time, trying to decide what to do, what to say, whether I should even say anything at all. For a brief moment, I considered pretending, just acting normal, going to dinner, smiling, talking, playing my role in a relationship that apparently had never been what I thought it was. But the thought didn't last, because once you see something like that, you don't unsee it. And I knew that if I stayed quiet, it would stay with me. In every conversation. Every touch and every good morning text that suddenly wouldn't mean the same thing anymore. I heard the bathroom door open. Footsteps were casual and unaware. And something in me just settled. Not calm and not okay, just decided. He walked into the room like nothing had changed. Like this was still a normal night, like I was still the same person he had left a few minutes ago. Are you ready? He asked, grabbing his phone from the table. I looked at him for a second. Really looked at him. Trying to match the person standing in front of me with the one I had just discovered on that screen. And I couldn't. Can I ask you something? I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He didn't even hesitate. Yeah, of course. I turned the laptop slightly toward him and opened the file again. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. For a split second, he just looked at the screen. Then at me. And in that tiny moment of silence, I saw it. Recognition. Not confusion and not surprise. He knew exactly what I was showing him. What is this? I asked. Still calm and still controlled. Because I needed to hear him say it. He exhaled slowly, like he had been caught doing something inconvenient. Not something devastating. It's just something I keep, he said. Just something. I felt something tighten in my chest again, sharper this time. Something? I repeated. You have a list of women you're evaluating. You have rankings and percentages. You wrote that I'm good for now. My voice cracked slightly on the last part, but I didn't stop. You didn't think that was something worth explaining? He didn't react the way I expected. There was no panic, no apologies, and no desperate attempt to fix it. He just looked at me calmly, almost analytically. I didn't think you'd find it, he said. That was his answer. Not I'm sorry. Not it doesn't mean anything, just that. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. So it's real? I asked, even though I already knew. He nodded slightly. It's just a way to stay objective. I actually felt a short, disbelieving laugh escape me, but there was nothing funny about it. Objective. I repeated. About what? Choosing who you want to marry? He didn't flinch. Yes. No hesitation, no shame, and just a simple, honest answer. Like we were discussing a long-term investment strategy. And what happens when you find someone with a higher percentage? This time, he didn't hesitate. I make a decision. A decision, not a conversation. Not a mutual choice, a decision. I felt something inside me shift again. But this time it wasn't breaking. It was clearing. Like everything that had been confusing suddenly wasn't anymore. Have you already made one? For the first time since this started, he paused. Just slightly, but it was enough. And I already knew the answer before he said anything. I've been talking to someone, he admitted. Of course he had. One of the names. One of the top candidates. How long? A few weeks. While he was still texting me good morning. While we were still making plans. While I was still thinking we were building something real. I nodded slowly, not because I was okay, but because I understood everything. Finally, completely, painfully clear. And then I asked the one question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since the moment I saw my name on that list. Was I ever your choice? He looked at me. Really looked this time. Not at the screen, not through me, just at me. And for a second I thought maybe this was the moment he would say something different. Something human. Something that would make all of this feel less calculated, less cold. But it didn't come. "You are a strong option," he said. That was it. That was the answer. And strangely, that's what made it easy. Not painless, but simple. Because in that moment, I realized something I should have understood earlier. You can't compete in a system where you were never meant to win. I closed the laptop slowly. Not dramatically and not angrily. Just done. "I'm not an option," I said, standing up. My voice didn't shake this time. Like we were discussing a long-term investment strategy. And what happens when you find someone with a higher percentage? This time, he didn't hesitate. I make a decision. A decision, not a conversation. Not a mutual choice, a decision. I felt something inside me shift again. But this time it wasn't breaking. It was clearing. Like everything that had been confusing suddenly wasn't anymore. "Have you already made one?" For the first time since this started, he paused. Just slightly, but it was enough. And I already knew the answer before he said anything. "I've been talking to someone," he admitted. Of course he had. One of the names. One of the top candidates. How long? A few weeks. While he was still texting me good morning. While we were still making plans. While I was still thinking we were building something real. I nodded slowly, not because I was okay, but because I understood everything. Finally, completely, painfully clear. And then I asked the one question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since the moment I saw my name on that list. Was I ever your choice? He looked at me. Really looked this time. Not at the screen, not through me, just at me. And for a second I thought maybe this was the moment he would say something different. Something human. Something that would make all of this feel less calculated, less cold. But it didn't come. "You are a strong option," he said. That was it. That was the answer. And strangely, that's what made it easy. Not painless, but simple. Because in that moment, I realized something I should have understood earlier. You can't compete in a system where you were never meant to win. I closed the laptop slowly. Not dramatically and not angrily. Just done. "I'm not an option," I said, standing up. My voice didn't shake this time. "I'm not something you compare, or rank, or keep around while you decide if something better exists." He didn't stop me. He didn't argue, and didn't try to fix it. Because to him, there was nothing to fix. This was just how things worked. I grabbed my bag, my phone, everything I had brought with me that night, and walked toward the door. And right before I left, I turned back, just for a second. Not because I needed closure, but because I wanted him to hear this. "You didn't lose the best option," I said quietly. "You lost the only person who chose you without needing a list." And then I walked out. I didn't scream or cry. Just a kind of silence that felt heavier than anything I could have said. And the strangest part? I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. Because for the first time since I met him, I wasn't being evaluated. I was just free. And sometimes I still think about that list, not because I miss him, but because I wonder how many people are out there, loving someone who's quietly deciding if they're enough. So tell me, would you be okay being just an option? Or would you walk away? If stories like this hit you, subscribe.